Yo, welcome to Sig Slayers, the comic signature show, period. I'm Mike the Sig Slayer, chilling with Mark. What up, fam?
What's up, Mike? How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm ready to get started. Joining us today, we got two comic book legends. We have Jason Aaron and Doug Mahnke. Doug and Jason are here to talk about their latest adventure, Batman Off-World. But before we chop it up with the crew, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right, let's get to the meat and potatoes of the show. Our next guests are two giants in the comic industry. One is a regular here on Sig Slayers, the co-creator of The Mask, the man that made Black Hand amazing, the powerhouse of penciling, Doug Mahnke. And our next guest is a first-timer here on Sig Slayers. This dude has written damn near everything. The writer of The Other Side, Scalped, Wolverine, Thor, Star Wars, the latest writer on Action Comics, and here to talk about his latest collaboration with Doug, Batman Off-World. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you the one and only Jason Aaron. What up, fam?
Damn, that's a great intro. I don't know if I can live up to all that.
You already have, man. You were worthy of it. That's why we whooped it up for you, man. So thank you for joining us, Jason. We're going to just dive right on in. And so, Jason, since it's your first time, we always like to give these accounts with our first timers. And so it gives you the opportunity to share your comic book origin story. So how did you get your first gig in pro comics?
I won a Marvel Comics talent search contest, which was like 23 years ago now, I guess, at this point. It's kind of not long after I'd moved to Kansas City. Is this weird thing they did at Wizard World Chicago, which I was going to every year back then, and entered and won and got to write an 8-page Wolverine story that was published, my first published work. And then it was kind of 5 years before I had anything else, before I had The Other Side. It was kind of my first full first miniseries, first full 22-page comic script I'd ever written at Vertigo. So I kind of broke in a couple times, with the talent search contest, and then Vertigo was my home for several years between Other Side and Scalped.
Jason, how did you pitch The Other Side to Vertigo?
That's got kind of a long origin story, and that, in that time, kind of after I won that Marvel Comics Talent Search contest, I owe a lot of my career, I guess, to Bill Jemas, who, was the publisher at Marvel back in those days, who I've never met, who seemed a bit crazy and was always sort of pulling out crazy ideas. And so that talent search contest was one of the ideas, which I won. And then another one was this relaunch of Epic Comics, where they started taking pitches, which turned into a disaster, where like the halls of Marvel were piled with bags of mail and all these pitches from new writers. And so I sent in a pitch for a relaunch of the Nom. And as part of that, you had to have written the first issue script. And so that was the first full comic script I ever wrote. Most assuredly the hardest I've ever worked on one script in my life. I didn't have anything else to do. I was working a crappy job in a warehouse and just spent months working on that script, and it got turned down by Epic, but I sort of had it and chopped it around and eventually got it in front of Will Dennis, an editor at Vertigo, and he said yes. So that was kind of, all that was really 5 years. That was 5 years of work, probably the hardest I've worked during my time in comics, where I had nothing to show for it. But out of all that work, I eventually got my first book, and that led to my second book, and that brought me back to Marvel, and kind of one thing led to another.
We hear you're a big Morrison fan. Was it exciting finding out you'd be working with Doug, knowing that he'd worked with Morrison previously? And tell us, how did you end up working with Doug?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's exciting to work with Doug based on everything he's done, not just the stuff he's done with Grant. Yeah, I'm a huge Grant Morrison fan, have been since I think I discovered his Doom Patrol, back in the day, and then Animal Man, and then everything after that. So Grant's always been a huge influence on me as a creator. But Doug's been one of those artists I've loved his entire career. Like, I've always been such a huge fan of everything he's done. Always followed him from any book that he did. And once I became a professional, I've always wanted to work with him. I'd asked many times, like, could we get Doug for this? And it was never. I was always, as exclusive to Marvel, and he, for the most part, was exclusive to DC, and it was never possible. So once my, about a year ago, when my Marvel exclusive was up, and I knew I wasn't going to renew it, and I could sort of stretch my wings and work for whoever, and I started talking to Ben Abernathy, the Batman editor at DC, and pitched him Batman Off-World. The first name came out of my mouth was Doug. I was like, can we get Doug for this? Because I knew, like, he's perfect. Like, I could picture it already of like how he would kill these scenes and draw the hell out of all the alien technology and the different alien races and the action and gritty. It's a ridiculous space story, but it's supposed to feel, dark and grounded and gritty. And I knew Doug would go crazy on that. And I think even though I came in as such a huge fan of Doug's, and like I said, felt like I could picture it in my head of what he was going to do with it, it was still even better, than what I have in mind. I think he's been really excited and been really into this, so he absolutely killed it.
Doug, how did you get tied in with Jason Aaron and Batman Off-World? How did that even come about?
Well, at least, the part that I have zero control over is the fact that he decided to come over to DC and do some work, which is pretty cool. Our editor, Ben Abernathy, he hooked it up together. I mean, I've never had much time off, in the last 7 years of working for DC. So, you get to the end of a project and somebody extends you another one. So I was just more than happy to do it, especially, having spent time in the Bat office, I like it. And like Batman, what can I say?
Yes.
Pretty easy when somebody says, yeah, Jason Aaron's coming over to do this. And it's like, all right, I didn't have to think about it. Batman in outer space. Yep. No problem. Off we go.
That's what I love about you, Doug, because like people love your Batman. They love everything you do. But people really love your Batman. And usually artists that I meet, across the land, the things that they're really popular about, they really hate doing. It's like, it's like mundane to them. It's like they don't want to do it. But you're like, yeah, put me in the Bat office, homie. Put me in, coach.
I love Batman. Batman's, how can you go wrong with Batman? Number one, it's you have this, you get to draw these super iconic, really fun shots of him. I think when I was younger, as a kid reading comics, and I'm not joking, even as a kid, I didn't like capes. I was just not a cape guy. I came in, with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man had this, super slick look. Well, compared to a lot of other superheroes, so that was my introduction, and I stayed there with those kind of characters. Very few characters that I ever actually read comics on had capes. But then again, I was a Marvel kid. But boy, did I ever learn to love capes when I started drawing stuff like, Batman and Superman or Martian Manhunter. Capes can be fun. From the artist side especially, you realize, wow, the cape does everything. Cape adds drama. Cape hides stuff. You can really take advantage. Cape, accentuates, action. There's so many things you can do with it. And I went from being a kid who didn't care for capes to be an adult who clearly likes capes.
When Mark and I were prepping for the show, Doug and Jason, I noticed that there was a commonality between the both of you. Jason grew up a DC guy, but he had a big chunk of his tenure, his popularity over at Marvel. And Doug, you grew up a Marvel guy, and you've been at DC for damn near 30 years. So I wanted to ask, Jason, and then I want to ask you, Doug, again, if you want to clarify more. Jason, what was it about DC characters that appealed to you when you were young? And Doug, what was it about Marvel? And I know you, besides the capes, because you mentioned that, but what was the other element that you liked about Marvel? Well, starting with you with DC, Jason.
I don't know if I could say it was like, well, what appealed to me was that one universe was different than the other. I think it was just kind of the specific books that I stumbled upon on the spinner rack. Superman books were a part of that. Some of the first books, first comics I ever read, Batman. It was kind of. I got into comics in the '80s, and when the New Teen Titans was huge, and that became my favorite book. And then, it was kind of right before Crisis, so I loved Crisis. And you got, like Batman Year One. You got John Byrne Superman. George Perez Wonder Woman. Like all those books. I became huge fans of, and there was Marvel stuff in there too. Like Kraven's Last Hunt and the Mutant Massacre was kind of when I discovered the X-Men. So, but the books that were like my gateway drug, that were like the taste that got me hooked, where I was going back to the spinner rack constantly, and they were all DC books. Those big ones, plus weird stuff like Atari Force and Blue Devil and Omega Men, and so much good stuff, in that period in the 80s. And then I opened the door, then I was reading everything. I've never been like, even though I started with DC, I've never been like, oh, well, I'm a DC guy and I hate all this other stuff. Like in the 80s, you had that explosion of, First Comics and Eclipse and all those other companies. And I was like eating all that stuff up.
I think I was about 6 when I started collecting. I was a kindergartner at least. And so it wasn't so much that, let me just make, it's a quick story. There's a guy named Mike who I lived in, at that point, I lived in Washington State, Pullman. And there was a university student who rented a room, or the basement, from my parents. And he was a rugby playing college student, collected comics. His name was Mike. There's things I remember about Mike. He was super thick and he was bleeding all the time because he was a rugby player, and he loved comics. And when he would get done with his comics, he handed them to me. He just gave me all of his comics. If I still had that collection, in spite of what I did to them, which was I didn't treat them like anything special. I treated them like everything special. I read them, I consumed them. It would have probably been a pretty valuable collection to have. But that's all he read. He read Marvel Comics. So you'd have to ask, if we could ever ask Mike, which is never going to happen, why those, is that what you handed me? So that was really what got me interested in these characters. And I really did tend to prefer single characters. Teen books didn't appeal to me as much, though I would read some Fantastic Four. I read everything, but I clearly liked Spider-Man. He's my number one. Like Thor. And being an artist, I was often drawn to, just the quality of the art and who's, creating it. So, Gil Kane and Ramita and Starlin. I just ate up all their stuff. I loved Captain Marvel because I loved how Jim Starlin would draw just these freaking exotic, spacescapes. It just blew my mind. And then occasionally, the best way that Marvel could get me to pick up a comic that I had never read before was to have a Gil Kane cover. So they knew what they were doing. Every time they had Gil Kane draw a cover, the interiors sometimes weren't the same, unless he was doing it. But that's really what kept me there. I did know who Batman and Superman were, because to me they were TV shows. It could have gone the other way. I could have been fed a bunch of Marvel or DC stuff because, rugby playing Mike preferred that. But no, it was just Marvel. I don't think he ever handed me. I think I had one DC comic, and I can't even remember which. It's a detective one that has Ra's al Ghul on the cover, and it opens with, I think, Robin coming through a window and he gets shot or something. It's just amazing comics, beautifully done.
So, Doug, does it look like you're gonna do any Marvel projects in the future?
Number one, I'd have to not be under contract with DC. I mean, I'm getting older, in case anyone's ever noticed. I'll be 61 coming up in February. And trust me, I'm curious to see how I would do. I don't see myself as going over to Marvel at some point and just becoming a Marvel guy and just doing, massive runs, because I don't even know if they do that anymore. But it certainly would be nice to do something as I envision me doing a Hulk or a Thor book. Or for some reason, I'm not as interested in Spider-Man, because I really like Spider-Man to stay in his compartment in my heart. I'm not so much, I gotta do this. But hey, if you find a reason to, trust me, I would do it. I would do something at Marvel.
Well, I know a guy who's written some Thor comics. If you're interested, I could put you guys in touch.
Now joining us is colorist extraordinaire and master storyteller, David Barron. What's up, David? How you doing, brother?
Good, man. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well, man. David, last time you were on with Doug, you were breaking down art from Swamp Thing Green Hell, a project with superstar writer Jeff Lemire. Now you're teaming up with another heavyweight writer, Jason Aaron. Is this the first time you're working with Jason?
It is, because he comes from Marvel. I've been almost exclusively with DC my whole career. The last time I did any Marvel was back way in the day with Heroes Reborn, when Rob Liefeld did Captain America. Jim Lee was on Fantastic Four, and Wills was on Iron Man. And I forget who did Avengers, but it was back when Marvel needed a little image help, get them back in. So we're talking about years and years ago, back when I was just a teenager.
David, you worked with Batman a bajillion times. When I think of you, you have an illustrious career, but you have worked on some of the most pivotal Batman titles of all times. And so it begs the question, what palettes did you think about? Where were you going, knowing that you're going far, far away from Gotham? Walk us through your coloring process.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and it's an interesting take, because I have worked on Batman for so long. And I've been in Gotham City, I've been in other, places on Earth. And, and Doug has also me and Doug have worked on Batman for so many years on different types of Batman books, but most recently Detective Comics, all the way up to 1000. And so you have two creators that have worked together for a long time, two creators that have worked on Batman multiple times. And so we have a very good grasp of Batman's, I would say, grittiness, and what makes a Batman comic feel like a Batman comic. And so now we take Jason's story and we're taking him off world. It's supposed to be his first time ever off planet. And we needed to feel like a Batman comic because it is a Batman comic. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that we give the reader exactly what Jason's trying to do, which is make it feel foreign, make it feel alien, make it feel non-Gotham. And but at the same time, give the readers what they love about Batman, make sure it's still there. And I think we're pulling that off, beautifully. So palette-wise, it's the opposite of Gotham's dark and dirty color schemes, and it could be the same colors, just used differently. But I made sure that when we're in space, there's a ton of magentas, tons of yellows and greens that mix with those magentas and those cyan colors that are a bit brighter. So when you look at all the space scenes, I want to make sure that we know that we are way off-world, that we are not, orbiting Mars or Pluto, or we are gone. I forget what actual nebula we're in, what cluster we're in. Well, I want to make sure that the space is not just black and white with stars, that there's gas clouds that we don't know or we don't see, and the alien ship is basically in a big hurricane that generates the power of the ship, and so it's always has this hurricane around it. And I wanted to make sure that hurricane looked to be a cosmic energy, cosmic dust, cosmic radiation. And so it's really fun to add all those bright colors into a Batman book. Then at the same time, it's still a Batman book. So whenever we can get dark and gritty, we definitely, put that in. We tend to, Batman tends to find those areas and feel more at home. I think Bane, in the movie said something, you chose to be in the dark. I was born in it.
Right.
One could say he chose, one could say he was raised in it as well. He may not have been born in it, but he was definitely raised in it. So I always keep that in mind when I'm coloring Batman. And whenever we can give a brighter color scheme, some brighter reds, some magentas, again, some cyans, I want to make sure I throw them in there any chance I can, just so we feel that it's definitely off-world, that we're not in Gotham, that we are in some alien form, type of atmosphere.
So here, Jason, the next question's for you. It seems that throwing your characters into the unknown is a common theme in your writing. Some examples might be The Other Side, Wolverine Goes to Hell, Sea of Stars, and Batman Off-World. Do you feel that this trope is necessary for character development?
Well, I mean, some of it's just taking a character who's faced every sort of challenge you could imagine over the course of the previous decades and trying to do something new, right? Especially me coming in, this is my first Batman book. I wanted to do something that still seemed surprising. I didn't want to do gritty street level Batman. Like I'll get to that. I'd still love to do that, but I wanted to do something that seemed different. So it's like, how do you do a different Batman story? We've seen every kind of Batman story you could imagine over the years, but I felt like I hadn't seen one like this. We've seen Batman, in space and interacting with the characters kind of outside the realm of Gotham City, but to see like young Batman do that for the first time, so it's the first time he's ever going on this kind of adventure and first time he's ever facing foes like this. Like I thought that was really interesting, and the possibilities that opened up of where you could go with that seemed like a good way to kind of make my proper DC writing debut. I think of Batman as like that guy from the first arc of Grant's JLA, right, where he's able to sort of face off against the Martians. It's like this is the first step, Batman's first step on the road to becoming that guy, right? It's like, how do you go from David Mazzucchelli, Frank Miller, year one, to that guy from JLA? Like, there's a big gap in between, and this is sort of the beginning of that journey for him. He's still just Batman protecting the streets of Gotham, and kind of just starting to figure out how to do that, and feeling like, okay, I think I know how to do this, right? I know how to be Batman and beat up thugs in Gotham City, and then somebody shows up from off-world who just kind of kicks his ass and shows him like, oh, there's all this stuff out there you have no idea about, right? And he realizes, I can't just stay here to protect Gotham. Like, that stuff at some point will come to bear. He can see, it's like he can see his own future. He sees, maybe he's not even crossed paths with Superman, but at this point, or Green Lanterns, or any of the sort of, the cosmic threats, but he can see like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff out there, and at some point, even if I just stay here to protect little old Gotham, like, it's gonna be a problem, and I need to know how to deal with it. And so he sets out to go learn to do that. But also, that's kind of the kickoff of the story. But we see as the book goes along, it kind of expands from that. It gets bigger and sort of becomes the question of like, what does it mean for him to be Batman, and what is the real mission, and what is, how does that play out in this war-torn, far-flung other galaxy?
Man, and Doug is drawing this, dude. This is crazy. I'm salivating. People are salivating. Just the concept. I hope you guys know. I know you guys do, because you guys are comic book fans. But when we see names combined, especially big names that are not used to collaborating, people get excited, and we want big, gaudy concepts like that. So I can't wait. Doug, this question is for you. The last time you were on, we were talking about your last project, Swamp Thing, Green Hell, with Jeff Lemire and our pal David Barron. I recently saw or read or something on social media said that you had some challenges while making Swamp Thing Green Hell. How are the challenges of making Batman Off-World differ from the challenges that you had doing Swamp Thing Green Hell?
Well, Swamp Thing, yeah, that had challenges. That's a total understatement. I mean, it was health stuff, that I had been treated for a stroke, ended up with some rather, just absolutely debilitating insomnia. I didn't stop sleeping, which kind of gets to you after a while, I could barely sit down. The reality is I couldn't sit for more than it was hard to sit to begin with. And that was when I was working on Green Hell. So just the tension in my body was enormous. And I was walking. I was a compulsive movement. I'd get out and I'd go out and walk 4 miles. Then I'd come in for a little while, then go out and walk another 3 or 4 miles. I mean, I had to burn off energy. Didn't sleep. Even drugs didn't help me sleep. Slept very little. Thankfully, that's not my problem now. That was probably the toughest thing I've ever been through in my life. And it took a long time. It took about a year for it to totally go away. I'm still amazed every time I fall asleep. I was like, wow, I'm sleeping. But that was a long time coming. So being able to sit and focus, and if my eyes were grossly affected, I had a really hard time looking at things, especially things that close up. I still have some issues with my eyes, but I can sit and draw now. Before it was migraine headaches 24 hours a day, sometimes for days. And I still got stuff done. I mean, brutal. Now I have just little things, So now it's just trying to be fast enough to keep up, and I'm not really good at that yet. I used to just bang out pages like crazy. Now, even once I had made it through Green Hell, and then when I basically cracked open the script and started working on Off-World, it took a while to be able to finesse a page and to look at it, closely enough so I knew it, I could see it. I know it sounds weird to think I could draw without seeing something real accurately, but over time my vision has become more acute and my ability to focus specifically on a point. So now it's much easier. I'm just slower, way slower. But I'm, slowly things are coming together and speed is picking up, and the reliability of sleep. I'm often like a little woozy, it's not dizzy, it's not spinning dizzy, but it's a motion issue. So, sometimes that's more, sometimes it's less, but in the end, I'm way better off than I was during Green Hell. The beauty of drawing right now Off-World is that I pretty much get to make up everything that I'm drawing. I'm not having to reference it. If I have to reference anyone, I'm referencing myself to go back issues and see how I did something, or what was this like, or, the new something that I made. So that's nice. It's at my fingertips. I don't have to ask for it. But at the same time, then I keep doing I get something new to draw, a new art, a new spaceship, a new setting, new aliens, and that I get to sit and figure out something fun to do with it. Like right now I'm doing these two characters, some villains, and it's really fun. Like, what is their environment like? What is their, how do we present them? And it's all me. I get to just do it. That's what I just came back from, was dropping off pages to send to Jaime Mendoza, to get them inked, because we still do it the old-fashioned way.
You haven't talked about working with Jaime since you've been joining us. What's it like working with him?
Well, we're bros. We've known each other. We've worked together a long time now, and I think we mesh really well, and I like what he does, and we were brought together quite a while ago when we did Superman Wonder Woman, and that was the introduction. And at first I was like, because I think at that point I was kind of looking for someone, and I was working still primarily with Christian Alamy, but Christian had some things that he wanted to go off and do. And I knew the only way he was going to do them is if we stopped working together, because I sucked up all of his time. So Eddie Braganza, the editor that we had at that point, he says, "Hey, do you want to try? Why don't you see how this guy works?" And I said, "No, I got my guys, because I had the guys who backed me up, when Christian couldn't do stuff." And I thought, you know what, that's not, like Eddie's never steered me wrong. Let's try it. Let's see how this goes. And I never regretted it, So we've been working together for a long time. It's weird, but it's way longer than I expected. I mean, we just have continued on.
Working with Jaime is great. I mean, he and I have a good working relationship. I don't really know him like I know Doug, but we've got to work a long time. So we trade a lot of emails, a lot of text messages, because we are close together into the workflow. So I can't work until, he's done with his page. So we have a good relation there. But in terms of the artwork, I'm a big fan of inkers. So whether it's him or Ryan Wynn or John Livesey or Danny Mickey, I love inkers. I think they definitely polish the page up. I think they add a different feel to what I love in comics that I think a lot of digital artists can't create. And I think part of it is because it's always their own line is the final line. And sometimes having a second pair of eyes, another artistic hand, it goes really nicely.
Shout out to Jaime Mendoza. I just wanted to say that, man, because he's done some powerful work with you, and it's the first time we were able to give him his flowers on the show while you're here. So I wanted to do that.
Jason, I read your cousin Gustav Hasford wrote The Short Timers, a story that Stanley Kubrick adapted to Full Metal Jacket. How has Gus and Gus's life influenced your work?
Yeah, Gus was a huge influence on me. I only met him a couple of times before he died in the early 90s, but he was from the same neck of the woods as me, like from the small town in Alabama, and he was the first person I ever met who made their living from writing, right? I mean, he was an eccentric dude in that he was usually, whenever he would get a royalty check, he'd invite all his friends to dinner, but by the time they got there, he'd be broke because he blew it all on a bookstore, on the way there. So he had thousands and thousands of books. He also had hundreds of books stolen from libraries all across the country, which he eventually did time in jail for.
Wow.
He was wanted by the police for stealing library books. At the same time, he was nominated for an Oscar for the screenplay on Full Metal Jacket. So, the guy who's lived a colorful life, but to me, he was like, a god. Guy who dropped out of high school, but was one of the smartest guys I ever met, and that he could talk at length about any number of subjects just because he was such a voracious reader. I think that's why he took these library books, because he felt like he needed them, right? Like he would do something with them, right? Like he would use whatever he's getting from those books to write stories. And so I was just fascinated by him, and I think I already loved to read, and he was also a guy who, once he met you and he knew you were into a thing, whenever he traveled and saw that thing, he'd get it and send it to you. So he was always sending me books, and I was big into the Civil War, so he was sending me all these Civil War things as a kid. So yeah, I feel like I wouldn't be where I'm at doing what I'm doing without having Gus as my cousin.
Awesome, dude. That's dope.
And the other question I have for you is, how has living in the American South influenced your work?
I think, even though I haven't lived in the South for 20 years now, I still think of myself as a Southern writer. I think I'll always think of myself as a Southern writer. I think a lot of the stuff I do is influenced by that, whether it's set in the South or not. I think my Wolverine is very much a Southern character, even though he's Canadian. I think that just where I grew up, the small town I grew up in, things I love and don't love so much about that place, the culture and literature I grew up with, I think all that rolls into everything I've done. I think it's always important to be from somewhere, right? Like to have a voice that's influenced by wherever the hell you're from. Like these days, the great thing is I get to work in comics. I work with people who live literally all over the world, right? Like there's tons of artists I've worked with multiple times. So I don't ever meet until I travel to some, other country for a convention, and then we'll finally be in the same room together. So you can be from anywhere, but I think it's important just to have a voice that's, helps you stand out from the crowd. And there's not a ton of, Southern folks in comics. So I think that was one of the things that sort of gave me a different kind of flavor when I was trying to break in.
Let's shift gears back to Batman Off-World. This question is for the both of you. What's the most exciting thing about making Batman Off-World? Starting with you, Doug.
It's just a hella fun book, man. A lot like, Jason expressed earlier, having that Batman, just taking Batman someplace else. And, I'm quite accustomed to drawing Batman. I've drawn him in Batman, in Justice League, and Detective. And we've never done anything like this, so it's pretty cool. And he keeps, it's a 6-issue mini. They're 24-page books. So there's a lot of story there. And he keeps coming up with stuff. I don't even know how it ends. All I know is, and I don't even want to know, because every time I get the script and I'm going through it and I talk to Jaime, we're just like, dude, guess what? Blah, 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 he tries to guess. We can't guess what's going to happen in the next issue or whatever. And it's just been that much fun. The best way for me to express it from my perspective is, hey, the story, like I got through the first issue, the setup, second issue, and it's not every time I pick up a book that I've worked on and then I read it through several times. It's like, wow, I really like how this book turned out, I love the story. I love, the tweaks that were done after it left my hands. And just seeing it all together as a package, it's just really, it's very enjoyable. And I keep getting something new that I don't expect to happen.
Jason, what about you, man? This is all coming from your mind first, these words. What's so exciting about making Batman Off-World?
No, that's all. I mean, to me, what's exciting is everything Doug just said. Yeah, of course, it's exciting for me to be writing Batman, for the first time, doing a big DC book for the first time. But I think you can't get caught up in the fictional character part of the equation. Like to me, literally the most exciting thing is getting to work with Doug. Like I said, I've been a fan of Doug for so long. Like I ask on so many different Marvel books, hey, do you think we could get Doug for this? And it was never worked out. He was on one side of the fence, I was on the other. So once I crossed over that fence and had the idea for Batman Off-World, the first thing I said was, do you think we can get Doug for this? And at long last, the answer was, yeah, I think we can. So and it's a weird thing. Like Doug and I have never met. This is the closest we've come to like meeting in real life, is sitting here with you guys
on Sig Slayers. I love it.
Right. So yeah. and what I do, like I sit right here. Like Batman Off-World was written right here where I'm sitting. I sit here in a room by myself and write it up and send it off into the ether. And nobody else really ever reads that except Doug. Like I'm basically writing a letter to him. I'm writing for the artist, right? Like what you read, the comic you pick up is what we have made together, right? But what I do, the script I write, is really just for him. So to hear the person who's got to sit and draw that say they're having a good time, to me, like I feel like, okay, I did my job. That's literally my job, is to give Doug something he's excited to go draw, and then he does his awesome Doug thing, and then we've got a book. But if I can't get him excited to draw something, then the whole thing falls apart, right? So I feel like that is really the coolest part of it. That's what comics is all about, right? Like, I can't draw. I don't know how to draw. But getting to write a story that somebody else gets excited to do, let alone somebody of the caliber of Doug, like, that's the coolest part of the gig.
Man, this is a hellified kumbaya moment right here. I love it, man. This is great.
Last question, gentlemen. We talked about Batman Off-World. Is there anything else we haven't discussed that you would like to talk about?
Well, I'm not just tackling Batman for the first time, and I'm doing a Superman story that just first issue just came out. I'm taking over Action Comics for a few issues. It's a 3-issue story, big oversized 30-page issues. It's a crazy Bizarro story, a weird, creepy version of Bizarro we've never seen. It's a story that goes to some really, I think, will be some really shocking, surprising places for a Superman story. And so I am incredibly excited, kind of beginning my career as a DC writer with a Batman and Superman book. That's pretty great way to kick it off. And then I have all kind of other stuff coming out this year that I can't talk about. You'll be seeing me popping up at multiple different countries, companies that writing a lot of different kinds of stories, and what will be a surprising mixture of characters. Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, my creator-owned book still coming out at Boom. The second trade of that just came out this January, and third arc just kicked off. So I am keeping busy and super excited about all the stuff I got coming this year.
Awesome. Doug, what about you? Knee deep in Batman Off-World?
Yeah, it is. It's been really fun. I'm glad Jason made the trip over to DC, because I'll use this as like one of the biggest compliments. I mean, in terms of how it just moves easily from script to paper. I clearly have latitude, the ability to interpret what I'm reading, but it's been pretty seamless. I've yet to sit and just go, what the, like this. It's everything so far has been just like, it's just been, I won't say cakewalk because that's not accurate, his work, but it has really been fun. And it's going to come to a close. It's only 6 issues. But I realize, at this point, because it's, still got story to draw, and I just know that there's going to be some twists and turns that I absolutely don't expect. And that's what makes drawing comics fun, especially from an artist's perspective.
Stash fam, you got to give my man props, man. He just brought you within the page of Batman Off-World, man. I love it. So before we let you go, are there any other projects? I know there are. You're a busy guy, but let the Stash fam know what other projects you're involved with.
I'm also on Kneel Before Zod with Joe Casey and Dan McDade, and just loving it. It's a whole nother feel. And again, I always think of comics as a new movie project, and the way I go through a horror movie is not the way I'm going to do a sci-fi, and sci-fi is not going to be a romance. However, it always has that David Barron feel, or at least that's what I hope. And I'm always trying to compliment, everybody that's a part of the team. So Kneel Before Zod is an awesome ride and adventure, and I hope people check that out. I believe issue 1 is out now for that. I'm working on issue 3 right now. So that's fantastic, and we're definitely on schedule. Dan definitely he'll give me batches of 10 at a time for a 20-page book, so it's really awesome that way. The other book is Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor, and that's written by Mark Waid with amazing art by 2 legends, Brian Hitch and Kevin Nolan. I spoke with Kevin at Long Beach Comic-Con. He's a fantastic guy. I've talked with Brian. I've known Brian since The Authority, a long time ago in Stormwatch. That's the first time I ever colored. Brian Hitch was on Stormwatch. and just pieces here and there, and then Authority. And then I worked with Brian on America's Got Powers and a couple other of his, own books. He's just an amazing talent, and but that book is in the works. It takes a little time, but that work by Kevin is phenomenal, and I think I've been doing some amazing work myself on that book. And then I have my own creator owns. So I've been writing. I write Stained. Volume 2 is actually all done. It's fantastic. We're looking for a publisher. It's leaning towards Kickstarter right now, and I'm okay with that. And it's done by Carl Mostert. I worked with him on many Batman small projects like Batman Urban Legends. Him and I did some stuff together. I'm actually working on with him right now with John Layman on this April edition of their comics. So DC usually has a special, not a gimmick's a bad word, but April Fools, April editions for their comics. And I don't know if it's announced yet of what we're actually doing, so I won't say it yet, but it's phenomenal. It's right up John Layman's alley. And then I'm working on my all ages book, Cobblestone Chronicles, with Elisa Wiki. It's a all ages book, very cartoon, noodly art. It's funny. It speaks to children of all ages. It really does. But if you have a young reader from, I would say, anywhere from 2nd grade to 8th grade, the book is very much for them. Diary Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants, so that type of genre. But it's been very well received, and I'm happy to make that book over and over and over again. So,
Doug, Jason, thank you guys so much for joining us. I want to definitely have you guys back. Doug, this is your home away from home, but Jason, we definitely want to extend a welcome to you or for any projects you want to promote and highlight. Stash fam, please be sure to pick up Batman, Off-World, and Action Comics that just came off the stands this week. Pick it up. Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the like button. This is Sig Slayers. I'm Mike, speaking for Mark, Jason, Doug, and David. We are out. Peace!
Sig Slayers.